Necharak Ra, Lutater Ra, Nukra. Necharak Nebeteshara, Lutater Nebeteshara, Anuk Nebeteshara. Necharak Amara, Lutater Amara, Nukamara. This is your brother Capra. Once again, I'm coming at you with a video about transcending spiritual oppression, an awakening of the spirit. Spiritual oppression. Let me first pay homage to my ancestors, elders, teachers, and guides, those not only here, but on the other side. For without you, I could have not done it. Thank you. In the Yoruba tradition that comes out of Ode Remo, there's an Odu called Irete Meji. Irete means the oppressor. However, it is also identified with initiation into the mysteries of the universe. However, it's because to press is to iron out the kinks in one's character. The ego is pressed, crushed, so that it transforms and can take place in the most truest of senses. You can actually change your DNA with your thoughts, emotions, as well as your food intake. Your DNA sends out signals that leaves imprints on the environment. The very one that you're in. At the same time, your DNA is broadcasting thought forms around the world and throughout the universe. As we explore manifestations, aka creations, we become co-creators. So when the ancestors charted the heavens to keep track of the movement of heavenly bodies like the sun, moon, stars, and planets, they divided the heavens into 36 measurements of 10 called decans. The ancestors worked with the principle of as above, so below. Hence, they learned how to activate 360 degrees of power within their collective psyche. These 360 degrees were the same 360 degree or 360 Neteru of the Kemetic traditions and the 360 Ilahu of pre-Islamic Mecca. These represented 360 sense faculties. The Giza complex itself is the place where mortals were transformed into divine beings and transported to other realms. In the Western education system, we learn that there are five senses, and sometimes it eludes us as to having a sixth sense. The indigenous ones are various traditions. The wisdom keepers of Kemet speak on having a sixth, and not only a sixth, but also 360. Hold, please. So these are 360 senses, which are the 360 Netaru, functioning as aspects of the self that must be awakened within every individual. The wisdom keepers further taught that the average person has awakened only 5 of these aspects within themselves. So we shall put a heavy emphasis on the 4 sons of Heru that represent the 4 cardinal points of existence in the 4 corners of the Great Pyramid of the Giza complex. They are Hapi, Tuamutep, Kwabzenef, and Amseti. These 4 Netaru are key to our health, which plays a role in the awakening of our other sense faculties. And individualized fractals of the universe represent a single portion. As individualized fractals of the universal mind, we transcend the illusion of space time limitation. Locality is part of the illusory construct. It is anything, if it's anything that Black people have contributed to culture, it's called soul, from soul food to soul music. Even in a state of oppression, the so-called Negro has been able to tap into the innermost soul and utilize the creativity that dwells within him and her. The soul is the interface that connects the body with the spirit. The soul holds within it the beauty, strength, and wisdom of co-creation. The soul is the SOUL as well as the SOL and center of existence. Just as the sun is the center of our solar system, you can find the ancestral language of polyrhythm being spoken in our music, which has even had been played in its commercialized state, still affects the whole culture. It affects everything in American society to this day for those who have benefited of the polyrhythms that come out of the ancestral realm, the ancestral land at that. So we have introduced an element into society called soul and have been identified as a spiritual people. Soul means breath, but contains the word soul, S-O-L, which is Latin for the sun. And solarization is the activation of the soul, which in turn causes the inner light of oneself to radiate into the world. So ascension is the process of becoming Haru and rising up like a falcon, becoming a being who is no longer limited to the confines of matter. Haru was and is the prototype of the hero that stems from the land called Kemet, aka Egypt. We are a solar people and we shine as the children of the sun. The ancestors of the Nile Valley called the spirit of the sun Ra, and the Yoruba people call it Orun. When something is heated, it expands. When water is heated, it rises in the form of vapor. The consciousness of all humanity must be allowed access to the keys of liberation, because even the oppressor has oppressed themselves by keeping their foot on the neck of those who must rise. When you try to hold one group of people back, you're holding back on your own evolution. So therefore, ascension is elevation. Another symbol of ascension is none other than the falcon, a bird of prey that can ascend to the highest of heights and still see small animals running through the fields. The eyes of the falcon, which is much keener than our own. Therefore, the eyes of this bird had become identified with the all-seeing eye of Haru. This eye is called the Uchat. To develop the spiritual eye of the falcon, one must cultivate the power and awaken it. Hence, as one ascends the heights, they develop the insight and foresight to pierce the depths. There can be no ascension without love or murr. So ascension is associated with love. It is the same word used for the plow in ancient Kemetic language. We see that Kemet was indeed an agricultural society, and the idea of plowing the land was understood to be an act of love. We shall tell the story of victory with a focus on those of African descent who have descended to a state of hellish conditions all over the planet, whose destiny is to resurrect in consciousness and make the collective ascension of consciousness into the higher realms. Such a feat will prove to the world that anything is possible. This work has nothing to do with any type of superiority or inferiority, as it is you embracing your true nature, but to get you to understand how we as a people have come to be as we are, and how we have come to the situation we're in today, and how to rise above it and overcome it, how we can move further ahead as we grow in consciousness. In order for this process to reach success, there must be re-education, the re-education of ourselves about who we are and what we are. There must be a time where we prepare people for the up and coming vibratory shifts taking place despite their agenda to stop such a thing from happening. Young people must be encouraged to learn in ways that will not bore them or discourage them from researching on their own. And elders must pass down their wisdom. As we all become elders, we must do the same. And it has to trickle down, where the older teaches the younger, and the younger teaches even those who are younger than themselves. That's how it's actually done in many indigenous societies. So we have what is called the universal spirit soul, which is the collective psyche of the whole planet. And it is this collective consciousness that we feed as we learn and tap into it in order to become home in the collective ideas that shape the paradigm of the times. Everyone, regardless of how we look, the religion, class, and gender, has tapped into this collective consciousness at some point in their lives, and it is this reason that each and every one of us live out who we are supposed to be as we experience life through our collective thoughts, words, and actions, which are recorded in the memories of the universe. And some people call this the Akashic field. So the ancients understood this to be the true source of knowledge, in which they call Gnosis. The Ancient Ones' ancestors still live on as the widow's son, whose earthly father was murdered according to the African legend of Heru. Well, Seer is the father of Heru, who is murdered by Set, the lord of storms and chaos, and dismembered into 14 pieces. The mother of Heru is Ast, who was made a widow because of the murder of her husband Seer. In fact, the Africans are the people of this legendary story is Heru. And they even tell you this. Even in E.A. Wallace Budge's material talks about the Nubians being the children of Haru, who came about from the seed of Ra. Look at it, research it, read between the lines. Haru comes to avenge the wrongdoings done to his mother and father. It is our duty to master our inner and outer universe with the knowledge of alchemy and transform the conditions in which we find ourselves. In order to liberate ourselves mentally, spiritually, physically, it will take internal work, and on an individual and collective level through an adjustment in lifestyle and certain disciplines. The internal fire can be activated in both the digestive system, which is the serpentine fire that travels up the spine. There has been many leaders who have fallen because they failed to learn about themselves enough to tap into the power of the soul and activate the power centers in the body in which their soul manifests. The method deals with four sacred organs identified with the four Neteru called the sons of Heru, the Mesu Heru. And I'm not talking about just on the destructive path, but I'm talking about a constructive path, how you can awaken the divine frequency within yourself. But for the most part, restore the memory of those who are descendants of the very ancestors who did these great things, restore ourselves to greatness, and prove that all these negative things said about young black youth opposed to white youth are not true. Even most importantly, to point out the fact that we have our own destiny as divine beings. This means that we must transform our patterns of behavior, of how we think and what is necessary mentally, physically, spiritually, and this includes what we feed ourselves, how we breathe, the amount of exercise we get, and even how we handle male-female relations. We have to get those in harmony, family, because if male and female relations are thrown off, then there will be no strong families. Without strong families, there's weak communities. Okay? So there are basic rules to prepare our sisters and brothers to raise the inner serpentine fire and truly embody the power of Ra. Keep in mind, Ra is known as the Prince, Life, Strength, and Health. This is Ra power. The internal alchemical process demands that we cleanse, purify, and strengthen our minds, bodies, and spirits in our human forms. We become the receivers and transmitters of divine light. The so-called revolution is an evolution and will not be televised. It will not be put on social media. It will be internal. No matter how much I talk, the process is an internal one. Okay? No matter what we say, we'll shine based on our actions. It's not to say that we cannot talk about these things, but the real evolution comes when we do the work. So we will see why holy education, holistic education for the mind, body, and spirit is necessary, because the word holy is coming from the word helios, which means solar. And that's what we are to be, is solarized, sisters and brothers. We will see how our ancestors of the Nile Valley and beyond developed a system of cultivation designed to bring about transformations and initiations to awaken consciousness of the divine within the individual. Knowledge is important, but applied knowledge is supreme. When we're ignorant of our true nature and abilities and who we are, we become subject to obstacles that slow down and block our ascension process. That's because ignorance breeds fear, and fear will immobilize those who give too much energy to it. And this is why the media pumps us full of fear every chance they get. Those who are immobilized with fear will do nothing when it comes to achieving goals or even setting themselves free. So they will not be able to do anything for the collective because they're in fear. There must be a higher form of education that deals with the whole person, and this is the key to unlock the shackles on the minds of the populace. For the indigenous people planet-wide have been overlooked in their achievements, while their culture and spiritualities have been suppressed. So we know that social pressures and unrealistic expectations have played a role in destroying families. Hold, please. So, we have been taught away from our history and achievements, and this has left the stains of disempowerment on our hearts and minds, and of our communities and families collectively, to the degree that we no longer have to be forced to submit to an external entity. Instead, we're just simply told to obey with all the subtle rules that keep people in line. Miseducation. For those who remember the book by Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro, and it's a method to keep people from becoming too creative when you're miseducated. It is this very thing that we have to be on the lookout for. The spark of creativity that makes us closer to being divine. The ancestors created rites of passage and initiations that we would have a way to align ourselves with our divine destiny. The individuals must be encouraged to learn by direct experience. They must be shown that they are capable of solving problems on their own so that the divine God qualities are awakened within them. Rituals and trance work were the methods used by the ancestors to express a particular point of focus on the life force of the individual. This is key to countering the programming that has been seeded into the collective psyche of the original people worldwide, especially in the West. As long as one is in this matrix, he or she will be going through consecutive trance states. To go from state to state are transformations in consciousness. Transformations in consciousness. To be fully awake is to end the constant flux of trance states. Hence, transcendence, putting such fluctuations of the thinking mind to rest. Trance is the result of the refluctuation of the mind that is also in congruence with the states of energy. The Ifa teachings of the Yoruba and other African traditions understand that this is the fluctuation of the 16 patterns they call the Odu. One of the names of Odu is Yanla, the primordial mother. That's because Odu, as the mother, is the energy that operates at the maternal womb of creation, change and transformation in the nature of the manifest world. Odu is the calabash, the container, and our spirits are contained in matter, the matrix. But even though we appear to be contained in matter, the appearance of solidity is just that, appearance. Every pattern of Odu has its complementary opposite. Every Odu has its twin. This is the nature of a cosmic combination code, the genetic makeup of reality itself, but in the form of patterns beyond the sugars, amino acids, and proteins. When we look at our environment in the ghettos and barrios throughout the United States, we see the effects of poverty. The problem at hand is that it is linked to a lack of encouragement for those who live in these conditions to reach into themselves and tap into the inner genius in which they would be able to pull themselves up. The thought process must be developed, redeveloped. We learn the necessity of rejecting beliefs and thinking habits that no longer serve us as taught in the Holy Odui Fa Iwari Meji. If we look, we see that spirit in the psyche of our brothers and sisters worldwide. We have said, as W.E.B. Du Bois described, that black people have two souls. The same problem goes beyond the U.S. It is worldwide on the African continent and the United States. The fact that slavery and colonization has split us in two from within, both black men and black women, in two from within, on a soul level and in a literal sense, and now blacks struggle with an identity crisis and a feeling of powerlessness. We have forgotten our contributions to the world. We have a major step to take, and we must be willing to get past our comfort zones. And part of it is not only how we are being taught, but also how we're being entertained, because a lot of what we see as entertainment is a form of communication with the subconscious. The mind is indeed powerful to the point that the energy of desired goals can be manifested. Now, somebody watching this, they just called me, but that's okay. We're gonna go right past. You see what I mean? Because they're on Facebook calling me. Don't make no sense. Anyway, when you become focused on a particular goal, the brain waves charge up, and a magnetic power, excuse me, of such focus begins to increase. So, this is the result of connecting with the life force energy of the so called subconscious. The so called subconscious mind, aka subjectivity, has to be clean of all negative, non productive, and self destructive agreements. Hence, the so called Egyptian Book of the Dead, we see the scribe Ani going before the 42 judges where he denies that he committed 42 crimes. The fact is that in order to be free and free ourselves and expand, is to not only detach from the world of glamour and illusion, but also get past shame and guilt. The heart has to become light as the ostrich feather. The individual has to get rid of his or her baggage that takes the form of a heavy heart and therefore an unhealthy emotional body. The emotional body, if it's unhealthy, sickness and disease will manifest in the physical body. The heart is weighed down as a result of being full of anger and regrets. Also, the need to come and work on our character is not to be overlooked. The Kamal constantly had festivals of atonement to restore Ma'at to the land, as well as the word for the negative, menacing, and consuming entity called APEP. Family, we're going to wrap this up really quick. But one thing that I want us to understand is once we tap into this power, there's nothing that's going to be able to stop us. We just have to stop making the agreements because they show you all this violence of the things happening to us for a reason so that you can feel powerless and accepted. They love it when we talk about it and complain and go right back to our 9 to 5 jobs as if nothing happened because they know that we're accepting a position of powerlessness. So, to overcome that, we have to have an internal transformation, my sisters and brothers. So, with that, I'll be leaving you for now. We have so much more to talk about. But until then, stay beautiful, stay in the heights. Ankh Ucha Seneb, Hatat.